You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do. Hello, People Centric leaders. Welcome to the next episode of the People Centric Podcast. This week, we have a great topic and great team members to join us on it. We have with us right now, Matt Griswold. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. I'm excited about the topic, excited to be here, excited for the podcast, excited to be with you all. So can't wait to get started.
General enthusiasm.
Yeah.
This topic is a good topic. And I will say we did something very risky. I just threw the topic out. We said we liked it and we have discussed zero further. So let me get to that in a second. We also have with us Stephanie Anderson. Hello, Stephanie. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. I don't know that I'm as excited as Matt is. That was a lot of amazing excitement. I feel good about it. And I will throw out, it was my idea to do the risky strategy. So if it doesn't pan out, don't blame Diana, and preferably not me either. But we're trying something where we normally discuss these a lot before we do it. And this was one that I just thought like, ooh, let's not talk about it more. And let's just like live reaction in this podcast.
Okay, so here's the setup. This morning, I had a client call me and say, here's what happened to me. They did a review last week of an employee. This employee is a good employee. They had a few points of like, here are some places I would like you to improve. So they got like a 3.5 out of 5 is the rating that they got, which I hate that, but that's a different topic. We'll talk about that later. So it was not a great, excellent, wonderful review. It was not a bad review. It was very much like, you're doing all the right things. Here's where I think you could improve. And over the weekend, the employee who got reviewed wrote counterpoints to all of the points that were quote unquote negative. The things that they thought they could improve on, the employee was like, I think you're wrong. I'm actually doing great at this. And said, here are my counterpoints. Please attach this to my review. So my client was like, what do I do with this? What do I do? What happens now? And so we talked through, which I'm not going to say what I said she should do. We talked through it a little bit, but I thought this was a really interesting podcast topic. What happens if you disagree with your review? And granted, there's probably some HR things like there's a formal appeal process and all of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what if you just generally disagree? How do you handle it? What do you do? That's where we're going to start today. What happens if you disagree with your review?
Yeah. And like burn the place down is not a strategy.
Please don't do that.
It is a strategy.
Thinking of like Office Space. I told them I would burn this place down.
It is a strategy.
It is a strategy. I don't know that it's healthy though. You know, I like it, Diana. I like it that we talk about had a client, or sometimes it's like had a friend. So and so approached me and said, "Hey, this is going on," and then we take that. And I always picture those people who maybe listen to the podcast and maybe they're just ho-humming along and they listen to the podcast all the time, and then they're listening to you lay out the story and they're like, "Wait a second. This sounds really, I thought that was confidential. This is why we don't say your name, right? This is why we're not trying to.
Confidential. It's fine. No one's going to know.
Yeah, no one is going to know except for
How
you.
would they
Just
know?
play it cool, dude, right? Like, nobody knows we're talking about you, right?
And honestly, if it's happening to one person, it has happened to 20, right?
Yeah.
This is not this has happened. So like.
Yeah, you're not that special.
You're not that special.
Anyway, what we're saying is the reason why we're bringing it up is because, just like Diana said, you're not the only one that's going through it. In fact, whenever this Diana approached the topic, I think Stephanie and I know Diana already had a chance to kind of hear it, but we immediately had thoughts, right? And to Stephanie's point, we're just jumping right in. So I don't know what their thoughts are, but I do have thoughts of my own. And it's an interesting question, right? We do co-sign, and can I back up just one step? Just one step. We do co-sign the idea of being able to give performance appraisals, quote unquote, to employees. So when Diana says, I hate that process, specifically, you're talking about the rating 1 to 5. Do you want to
Yeah.
expound on that a little bit more? Because we're not
Yeah.
we're not anti giving feedback and appraisals. We're pro that. It's just that process.
Yeah, I'm very pro feedback. I'm very pro check-ins. I'm pro performance appraisals, all of those things. I think you need those to stay aligned, to stay connected, to know that you're doing a good job, to make sure you're meeting expectation. I love that part. What I don't love is the ranking of humans. I don't love the like, this quarter you were a 3. Like it feels icky. And then there are a lot of companies that are like, oh, we only give a certain percentage of 5s, right? And so it's like, well, what if I had 5 performance and there were just other 5s who also had 5 performance? You're just gonna like not give us the 5? I don't know. I don't love the 3 out of 5 star ranking thing. I think that's gross, but I love the concept of we sat down, we talked about it. Here were the places you can improve. I like that part of it. So yeah, good distinction, Matt.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Definitely
agree
agree
with
with that.
that too. Yeah, like I think especially when you hear the 1 through 5 ranking, what I really hear is you can either be a 1, a 3, or a 5. Because really, like, what's the difference between a 2 and a 3 or a 3 and a 4, right? Like there's just middle, right? And so I do think it's weird. And then it is like it gives weird excuses for companies to not like give bonuses to some people and then to compensate other people in a way that starts feeling not really fair to a lot of employees. Like, yeah, I mean, I know a friend who like, yeah, like only 2 people can get this score. Like the manager's only allowed to give 2 people in the department a 5. And those are the 2 people that get like a bonus. You're like, well, but what if you have a whole department of 5s? So you just have to pick 2, and then it's up to the discretion of the manager. And all of a sudden we start knowing like either who's favorited or who's gone and like begged for this bonus or been more vocal about it than other people. Like it's just weird.
It is just weird, but I think for the vast majority of the population of listeners that we have, you're probably a manager or in charge of leading a team of people, and you might be working for quote unquote corporate America or a larger organization or whatever that might sound like to you, and you're hearing us describe like, I don't like it, get rid of that, and you're going, I can't. It's the confines of what my job is constructed. Like I have to use that system. And so maybe let's just rest on there before we hop off of this, because before those folks just tune off the rest of the just tune out the rest of the podcast. Like, I can't change my circumstance. I'm living in a 1 to 5 world. I hate it too. Like, how do I deal with that? And maybe I'll just hop off, and you guys had anything to do this, because I came from that world. I came from a very corporate America world where it was a ranking system. And not only on that, not only did the corporate level install like, this is the ranking system, now they put it completely on the plate of the manager to say, and you have to, it was like a 70-20-10 kind of a thing, like how we're describing it, but you have to pick somebody on your team that needs improvement. Like, think about how that handcuffs you. And if you're that manager that's working, going, I know that's my life, I live in that. Like, I just want you to know, I feel you. Like that sucks. That's an awful place. If you are in charge of an evaluation rating process, and we're describing what it is that you are in charge of, and you have some space or some pull in that area, stop doing that. Like, that's a horrible relationship precedence to set as a manager, that now you have to, it's not just ranking humans, right? Because that's even if you want me to rank them, great. Yeah, we're all 5s. Woo, everybody gets a trophy. Don't get me started. But anyway, what I'm saying is, if I have to say, no, you guys are a 5, you're a 1, because I have to. And you know what? I don't know, you messed up once this quarter, and that's the only thing I could think of. And so you have to be the one. Sorry, not my rules. You are significantly handcuffing the ability of the manager to be able to build a psychological safe environment for them to be able to lead and manage their people. That's what I would say. That if you are the manager going, okay, but I'm here, how do I get out of that? Here's a tip: Like, here's a tip. Just don't wait for the review to actually start the conversation. Maybe if you're having ongoing conversation, and maybe that conversation builds trust, and maybe that conversation builds the relationship. And I think for some employees, it's easier to handle the final answer if the relationship has been built and trust has been built along the way. So by the time it gets to the evaluation point, it's like, I get it. That stinks. But this is simply an evolution of the conversation we've been having the entire time, right? So if I can build the trust in the relationship, then I don't have to wait for that moment to say, sorry, and I just, you're pulling the curtain back to say, this is what you want. And they're going, crap, how did I get that? And, there shouldn't be a moment like that. So maybe starting the dialogue and the relationship and the trust earlier. What tips do you all have?
I was exactly going to echo what you were saying. Like, there should be no surprise. So if those employees are a one, they should know that they're gonna get the one, right? You should have those conversations early and often. And also, like, make sure the conversations mean more than the number. I think that, like, is really what Matt was saying, is like, the number, if you have to do it and it has to be there, make sure those conversations are way more important than that number.
Yeah, and you better come up with something other than, I had to pick one and it was you. Like, there was some sort of a drawing and you won it. Like, you better be more specific than that. Like, just be prepared to have some specifics or details on why the score is what the score is, to the best of your ability, that you can. Side note, I shared this a while back, but it's stuck with me forever and ever. In corporate America, I've been a facilitator for a long time. I've been in front of people a long time, and I got a score. Long story short, I did a session, and frankly, I killed it. Like, it was great. Like, it was great. And my manager was in the back with a clipboard, scoring, checking the boxes, writing the specifics of, did he do this, did he do that, and all that stuff. And then after it was over, I went to his office for feedback, and I said, how'd I do? Because I love to hear it. How'd I do? And I felt pretty good about it. He goes, you got a 4 out of 5. And I was like, that's awesome. My next obvious question was, how could I have gotten a 5? And his response ruined the entire experience for me. His response said, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I've been trying to think of what you could have done differently to get a 5, and I can't think of one thing. That's dumb, right? Now,
then you should have gotten a 5. Like, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right? I'm okay with a 4. Just explain the 4, right? Just give me something tangible, and I'll go do that, right? But if your answer is, I can't think of one thing you could have done differently to get you to a 5, now you're telling me there is no reason for me to even try that then, right? There is no reason. This whole thing is a sham, so to speak. And so just be specific as you can, with the score if you're tied to one of those rating systems. I know not technically the topic we're talking about today, but I think for some managers, they're hearing it and they're living in it, and they're going, how do I make the best of that world? And hopefully those are some things that help you with that. Stephanie, did you want to tie a bow on that before we go forward?
Yeah, well, I was going to actually tie it to our client submitted question, whether they knew they were submitting it to the podcast or not, to say that I think, like, I'm trying to, like, put myself in this employee's shoes of, like, if you're going to disagree with the feedback given, of, like, if you feel like your manager just had to say something critical, right? Like, let's say this employee hypothetically was doing a really good job on all fronts, but the manager had to give something for improvement, then yeah, I might feel like I want to disagree with that if I know that there's a ranking system, or if I've asked, like, a question like you asked before, Matt, like, how could I get a 5? And they're like, I don't know. You know what I mean? So I also wonder, and you may or may not know this, Diana, for this story of, like, is that an element of it? And I think you maybe mentioned it is, and that might be why an employee would respond the way that they did. Not saying that that is a great response, to be honest, but if you feel like the manager just had to come up with something, and then you're like, dang it, this is going now in, like, my HR file that other people could look at, or as I look for promotions in the company, or even if it's a large company, maybe I apply for a job somewhere else in the corporation and this person doesn't know me and this is what they see, like, that would be hard.
I don't think in this case it was that they were tied to this ranking system. It just is part of their process. And in this particular case, this manager felt like she was even kinder than maybe she should have been, and she should have given a little bit less of a feedback. But she said, to her credit, she said, I haven't been as on top of it as I should have been. So I didn't want it to be as big of a surprise. So I couched it. I took the examples I could give, the ones we had already talked about. I put in the review. So she did the right things, right? This manager was doing the right things and having the right conversations leading up to this, and then said, here are still the areas that I think you need to work on and improve on. So yeah.
Let me kind of take us from here and say this. A lot of you are responsible, or maybe know what it's like to go through some sort of an evaluation like this. And there's a lot of emotion, maybe even leading into a conversation like this. Like whenever I speak, I say, hey, let's play word association. I say performance appraisal. You say what? And it's never a word. It's always a like people just make noises like, I hate performance appraisals. And what's funny is the manager hates them as much as the employees as much as the employees hate them. But there is a purpose for how we do this. And so maybe there's a right way and a wrong way to potentially approach doing this in the first place. And with the scenario that we have before us today, managers in charge of giving some sort of a performance appraisal, some sort of appraisal, some sort of feedback, right? Now managers have to have the space to be able to give critical feedback. In fact, I would encourage you, that's something that you want to add if you're not already doing it. If I'm only saying all of the positive things that you're doing, listen, your people want to know they're doing well, but they also want to know if they're not doing well. And so this is your opportunity to be, here's some things that I would want you to work on. But there's another part of this as well, right? And I'll just throw this to you all. Should these appraisal conversations be one-sided conversation? You know what I mean? Like, should this just be a here? And it's funny, should this be a sit down? I've completed the form. This is what I think of you, right? And I think, what do you think? Like, is that, or maybe there a better approach?
Well, I think that's what a lot of people do, right? I think that's what a lot of managers do. But no, I hate that. That's not a conversation. That's you talking at somebody. And I feel like these types of things are much better when it is a back and forth conversation, when the employee has space to say, great, I hear you. Thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you for honoring that. I did work really hard there. And also, oh, I see what you're saying here and here, but I dissent. I don't agree with that assessment. Here's why. And additionally, I think it's good when an employee can say, like, well, here, manager, these are the places where I think you can improve. I think it needs to go all the ways back and forth the entire time.
You just stepped on some toes there. I guarantee
did.
You just stepped on some toes with what you just said there. Sorry, Stephanie, go ahead. We could talk about it.
Oh, no, you're good. I agree with Diana completely. And to me, that was one of my first thoughts hearing that the employee sent an email to the manager. It was like, this obviously wasn't a conversation, or you did inadvertently blindside this employee in some way that they felt like shocked and didn't think through what they wanted to respond to in the moment. Because yeah, my first thought was, okay, if I get feedback that I disagree with, like, or I didn't know, I have questions, right? And like, I can actually think of at least once in my life where I got feedback in a formal review that I did not agree with, right? And I would say it wasn't this extreme, it sounds like, but I didn't agree with some of the feedback. And what I did is, like, I was surprised by it. So I went home and thought about it. And then I asked my manager, like, hey, can we meet again to talk about that? And I like took my questions to her and then was like, I want to talk about this part because I want to understand like what you see that I could be doing better, because I'm just going to lay my whole process on the table for you. I don't know that I see a lot of different options, but if I'm missing something, tell me, right? And then we could have a conversation where, I mean, I did kind of end up being right. They were able to be like, oh yeah, like, I guess we just thought you weren't thinking about it, which this was not a great manager. If you can tell from this story that they're like, oh, we just thought you were just decided blob just to do this. And we figured if you thought about it, you could do it better. That is not literally what they said, but that was kind of the gist of their feedback to me. And they're like, oh, I guess we do see where you vetted this out and this is the right way to do it. So, okay, that's fine. But yeah, I think to me, my initial reaction to just sending an email and not having a conversation was, okay, that means that this probably was a one-way conversation between you and the manager. And then it makes it feel like passive aggressive to like send this email. And as the employee doesn't put you in a great position as your manager, even though it feels like power for you to send this email, it's not, because now like you and your manager are still not on the same page. You've not opened it up for a conversation about like what they do see that you could do differently.
That's interesting. That was sort of my first thought too, was my first thought is you clearly don't have the relationship built with this person yet for them to feel comfortable either in the moment or later coming to you and being like, can we talk about this more? And so I was like, you need to work on your relationship with this employee, because it feels like they don't feel safe, or they don't feel comfortable, or they don't feel engaged enough, friendly enough, humble enough. I don't know. They don't feel like there's something there. You're missing the relationship connection there. There's a disconnect still. Yeah, that was sort of my like first initial reaction.
And I will say, maybe to the defense of this manager, because I don't know who it is. But you know, there might be a part of this where like it may be that this employee really is lacking some self-awareness and does not see it, and that this response is showing that like lack of awareness moment. And like, I so don't see it to the point that I'm going to ask you to attach this to my file to show that I disagree, which just kind of nails in that lack of awareness a little bit more. But I agree with you. It just shows a lack of the relationship between those two people, that no matter which it was, no matter, hey, I was aware of this, or I just disagreed, or I was completely unaware, that they don't have a relationship to a place where they could just have a conversation about this and ask questions back and forth and sit down and work through stuff with each other. That it's got to be this formal place where I give you this feedback. It's written down, so you feel like you've got to formally respond to me, and it's got to be written down, and everything's going into a CMA file, right? Like that just shows to me that really there's not a relationship, and there's not a culture of feedback, probably on that team, where we're giving the feedback as it happens. We're kind of squirreling away feedback to give in these meetings, which then is obviously surprising employees.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you guys are saying there. And maybe this is so there's developmental opportunities here, maybe on both sides. You're talking about maybe lacks self-awareness from an emotional intelligence side, maybe. But if they haven't been given the opportunity to also provide the feedback, that's not self-awareness. That's protecting yourself at the same time. Like, and I'm not even saying we have to fight about it. I'm just saying I think this side maybe should also be heard here. And so just because they're bringing that up, and I know you're not saying that, but just because they're bringing that up doesn't mean it's a lack of self-awareness. And I think I would also say this: what's the downfall of if they do bring something up, or if they do want to add something to their file? I don't care, right? Like, yeah, totally, I'll take that. Let's file that right along with my review. Hopefully, if I'm the manager, I'm able to stand on what it was that I wrote in the first place. Hopefully, if I'm the manager and they do bring something to my attention that I was not aware of that's leading towards this, then hopefully I have grace enough and humility enough to be able to say, listen, I didn't know that was a I didn't know that was a thing, or I didn't know that you were struggling with that, or I didn't know that that was that obstacle. Hopefully, you have a humility or a grace enough to be able to say, well, let's get together and hash this out. Then, like, let's talk about it. I think I could see from a manager's perspective, and again, not just in this case, but just in general, like if an employee says, okay, fine, but I want these things said, you could take that a couple of different ways, right? You could take that as, okay, that's great. Let's file that here. In fact, you mind, can we go through these things together before I file it? Like, I don't want to just blindly take the piece of paper and stuff it in there. Fine. Now you've been heard, right? Go back to work. No, I don't, that's the wrong approach, right? But that is my other option. If they say, I want to file these things here, and maybe it's the approach or the attitude under which they are filing their grievances there. But if you're the manager and you're hearing that, don't just get defensive immediately. Maybe take that next step, or ask the question of like, why do you feel that you need to do that? Or, yes, I will take that. Can we talk about them first? Like, I want to make sure that I'm not just filing it, but I want to hear you, right? And if you're talking about trying to build trust and the relationship, maybe that's a great first step. Something I ask managers all the time in leadership development training is, are you, as a manager, doing a good job of creating an environment where people feel safe to bring you stuff? where people feel safe to bring you stuff, not just the good stuff that they love about you, but the bad stuff that they wish you wouldn't do as their leader, or the bad stuff that they wish we wouldn't do organizationally. It's not an attack. I've got to feel comfortable providing a space for my people to do that, right? And I think that's one of the number one jobs of a manager of people or a leader of people, is being able to provide a space where people feel comfortable to bring me the good, bad, and the ugly, because they know they can trust me with it, and we're going to talk about it. It doesn't mean that anything's going to change by it, right? Sometimes it will, but not all the time. And I think that's how you start to create that movement there, as well. So we're saying we're all on the same page, right? Of a performance appraisal feedback session. We're saying it's a positive thing for a manager to provide the participant or the employee or whoever that is, the giver, to allow the receiver an opportunity to be able to talk about the rating, ask questions about we're in agreement, right? This is a back and forth kind of a thing, right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that conversation, it benefits both sides in this story, right? Because even if it's like, okay, hey, the employee does really want that in their file for whatever reason, right? They've obviously got a reason they think that somebody's going to look at that again someday. I think it benefits both parties to then, hey, respond and also put in the file of like, hey, we had a conversation about this. We actually talked about it. We built the relationship there, just worked on giving feedback more in the moment, talking through things as they're happening versus feeling like, hey, we've just got to really formally document all this stuff. Cause it sounds like too from the story, Dana, like the feedback wasn't like super hypercritical. It wasn't like, oh, there's all these horrible things happening that like, hey, the manager might be putting together some case for maybe like letting this person go at some point. No, it's just like kind of some generalized, like, hey, I think you could do this a little better or a little differently. And so I agree. I think we're all on the same page, Matt, of like, there's relationship building on both sides that I think could really, really benefit the situation, and just of having a conversation, versus making it so formal. We're now kind of like dancing around each other versus like actually like figuring out like, how do we work really well together?
yeah.
And
Diana?
I'm gonna sound like a broken record because I feel like I say this all the time, but if this happens to you, don't lead with your emotion, right? We always say like don't lead with the emotion, ask questions. Be curious. What is your manager seeing that maybe you're not seeing? Or what are you seeing that your manager's not seeing? Ask the good questions in the moment, or take a beat. You can take a beat and come back later and say, "Hey, I thought about my review. I now have questions." All of that's okay, but I think you have to start in a place of curiosity, and you have to move it forward through asking good questions, not moving it through like, I'm going to make you see my point, because that's never going to work, right? Like, ask the questions to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I'll say this lastly, and if you wanted to add anything else to it, but maybe you're on the opposite side of this and you're listening to this podcast going, man, I'm glad, we're a small company. I'm glad our company doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff, right? We just don't even give reviews, right? We just go to work. We just go to work. We just go to work. Everybody has a job to do. They know the job. There aren't even any, of those feedback conversations or anything like that. I would venture to say, even though it might feel good at that time, that's probably negative as well. Wouldn't you think? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, humans naturally want to know if they're doing a good job, whether it's a small team or a big team, right? Like, you want to know if you're doing a good job. And I think you do a disservice to people if you don't help them see the areas they could improve, the areas that they're doing really well, the areas of their job that they're falling short, the areas of their job that they're exceeding. Like, you're doing people a disservice if you don't show them those things.
Yeah, and I think if that's you, if you're doing that, it might feel good in the moment, but maybe you've been thinking about that, you don't even know where to start. Feel free to give us a call. Right, we love to install things like performance evaluation, check-in processes, and all that stuff. And it can't just be a form; it's also the conversation, right? And I can't just trust people to have the conversation. Like, people need to be developed into having that conversation. I think the number one thing that I hear from folks whenever we install a check-in process at an organization is I hear from managers, and they're going, thank you, thank you, thank you for this templated form, because I've always wanted to have the conversation. I just never knew what to say. I never knew what to say or how to approach it. And so maybe some of your folks are like that too. If you'd like to have that conversation, I'm sure any one of us would love to have that conversation with you as well. So feel free to reach out to us. I think we covered it, right? I think we covered it, and you might be going, well, yeah, but what's the answer? Well, it depends. That's the answer, right? Got to build it. I would say got to build the relationship. You got to build trust. I got to have an opportunity to be able to provide feedback, but I also have to build an environment where people are okay bringing me feedback too. I've got to be able to give it and receive it at the same time. And so there's a lot there. If you have any other questions or things to kind of counter any of that, we would love your feedback. Feel free to submit that in writing. Fax us a copy over of your feedback. We'll put that in your file.
Do not fax us. We won't respond.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's a letter.
I don't even know if we have a fax number. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know. I don't know. You know what? Get a hold of us. You have the technology to figure this out. Get a hold of us. Listen to the outro. Feel free to share the podcast. We love it. Love you all. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.